My name is Jeff Cravens. I'm from Elmsford, which is just barely qualifies as upstate for Stone Canoe. It's near White Plains. So I'm a practicing attorney by trade, so I represent school districts in Westchester County and kind of write for fun. This is actually my first essay that I've published or read. So this is about my dad and a NASA space mission that sort of paralleled my own life. Sort of an interesting fact about this space mission, Cossini, sort of what stemmed the essay was the idea that space missions really are as serious of magnitude as the pyramids in Egypt. And just to start out with a few little facts, statistics, and then I'll get into the essay. So the Great Pyramid of Giza apparently had about 13,000 laborers working 278 days per year times about 10 years. So about 132,000 man-years of labor went into the Great Pyramid of Giza. So the mission that I'm going to read about, Cossini, about 5,000 people worked on that. If they worked for 278 days a year, which they didn't all, because some of them, like my dad, had full-time professor jobs, but they worked on that for 20 years, from when it was conceived until when it approximately got to Saturn. That would be about 100,000 man-hours. So if you add the 13 plus years of them studying the data from Cossini, now we're at about 15, it easily surpasses the man-hours spent on the Great Pyramid of Giza. So that just sort of gives you a sense of the amount of work people in this country and in the world spend on space exploration. A space mission is like building a pyramid, my dad said, as he tried to convey the gravitas of the Saturn orbital insertion we were flying to Pasadena to observe. In 1983, the year I was born, NASA agreed to explore a potential joint mission with the European Space Agency to send the Cassini orbiter to Saturn, along with the Huygens probe that would land on Saturn's largest moon, Titan, whose dense atmosphere and seas of liquid methane mirrored Earth's life-supporting properties. Teams of European and NASA scientists, including my dad, prepared for the mission for years until the spacecraft launched aboard a Titan 4B Centaur rocket in 1997 when I was in 8th grade. The spacecraft traveled 2.2 billion miles over 7 years, slingshotting around Venus twice and Earth once to gain momentum before flying by Jupiter, all while I completed middle school, high school, and my first 2 years of college. So when my dad told me this aboard a plane to California in June of 2004, after over 5,000 people had spent decades of unfathomable man-hours on the mission, I couldn't deny that Cossini was as impressive as the pyramids in Egypt. Yet, unlike the pyramid, the payoff for all those years of labor would depend on a few short minutes. In that way, the Saturn orbital insertion wasn't so different than another type of insertion I was hoping to achieve as a college student in Ann Arbor after years of private laboring and yearning. For Cossini, the pivotal moment was whether the spacecraft would thread the gap between Saturn's F and G rings, fire its engines the opposite directions to decelerate the craft by 622 meters per second and safely enter Saturn's orbit. Failure would mean disintegration in one of Saturn's rings or its atmosphere. The moment is what my dad and I were flying to California to witness on a big auditorium screen near the Jet Propulsion Lab a few months before my 21st birthday. We wouldn't see it in a HD like a Tom Hanks movie, but via a graphic representing the spacecraft moving across the screen like a 1980s video arcade game. During the crucial minutes, we'd have no idea what was happening because Cassini's high-gain antenna would point forward away from Earth to protect the instruments from debris in Saturn's rings. If JPL received an electromagnetic communication from Cossini, delayed 84 light minutes, the time it took signals moving at light speed to travel the 934 million miles from Saturn to Earth, we'd know the insertion was a success. If JPL received no signal, it would be a very sad day for a lot of people, including my dad. My dad had asked my siblings and me if we wanted to go with him, and I was the only one to volunteer. My sister was in middle school and probably uninterested. My brother had just graduated from college and was settling in Washington, D.C. to start a job. I had finished a 6-week University of Michigan program studying New England literature in the Maine woods for the low-tech philosophy of Henry David Thoreau and was back home in Kansas for the summer. Over the years, I'd become the occasional travel companion for my parents, accompanying my dad to the bat mitzvahs for the daughters of his college friends in Indiana, and my mom to visit her lesbian artist sister in Kalamazoo. As a child, I relished the opportunities to escape our town in Kansas for glimpses of the world I read about in novels and heard about in my parents' stories. Because neither of them was from Kansas, my dad was from Long Island and my mom from Maryland, Kansas always felt like the nest from which my siblings and I would eventually wander. So I'm going to fast forward. Actually, this backtracks to a conversation we had in Paris, and then keep going from there. So we went to Paris. My dad took each of his kids to Europe if they studied the language, so I studied French, so my dad took me to Paris. So this is us at Paris. We sat across from each other in a restaurant where the waiter didn't try to hide his disdain for my attempt to order in French. Je voudrais. I tried several times before pointing to the menu. I have no doubt that my frosted tips, a product of the American boy band craze, only further inflamed his disgust. That trip was not my first time alone with my dad. He'd been one of the Cub Scout leaders starting in first grade when I joined Pack 3072, and we shared a tent and conversation on many occasions before I became a Boy Scout and wanted to be as far away from the leaders of the old Goats Patrol as possible, especially my father. Aside from Scouts, we'd spent countless hours driving to some band contest or spelling bee or sporting event, as only those who've lived in wide Midwestern or Western states can fully appreciate. But during that dinner in Paris, I felt, perhaps for the first time, that I was facing my dad on equal footing, or at least more equal than before. My dad revealed that, in one way or another, he'd always had his head in the clouds, like his dad before him. He was the oldest child of a weather serviceman stationed in Honolulu, and after the family moved to Long Island, attended a Catholic seminary school with thoughts of becoming a priest. In his junior year, around the time of the space race, he embarked on a different high-minded path to become a scientist. He never strayed from that trajectory, transferring to the public high school to complete the science prereqs the Catholics didn't offer, studying physics and astronomy at Stony Brook, and completing his PhD at Harvard, where he met my mom at a dance. She was attracted to his dreamy, long black hair and John Lennon glasses, and was no doubt impressed by his knowledge of the constellations before their first kiss on a rooftop beneath the stars. My parents' combined journey would take them from Florida and Colorado, Michigan, and Kansas in pursuit of my dad's career as a space physicist. I asked my dad what he liked so much about space physics, and his response has always stuck with me. He said that when you understand the math and physics behind the universe, to be able to explain and predict the way bodies in space act through elegant models and algorithms, it is beautiful. I remember him using that word beautiful because I can't remember him using it any other time, though I'm sure he did in relation to the many musical performances and art exhibits he admired in my presence. At the New England Literature program in Maine, the spring before the Cossini insertion, I would be riveted by B.H. Fairchild's poem Beauty, about the use and absence of the word among Kansas lathe operators like the poet's father. My dad was not the type of man, like those in the poem, who could only use the word to describe a handsome buck, a dead-on gunshot, or out-of-the-park home run. Yet his use of the word gave me pause. Of my parents' professions, my mom had the most obvious emotional, if not spiritual, implications. She was an Ivy-trained psychologist, she went to Cornell, by the way, serving the least among us, as said in the Gospel of Matthew, my brother's namesake. Mentally disabled clients in Michigan, and children and families coping with abuse and neglect in Kansas. My dad's work was unquestionably logical, and his logical nature often manifested in conversations about departure times, itineraries, and checklists of tasks needing to be completed. So his characterization of his work as beautiful was surprising. It also suggested that through mastery of advanced mathematics and physics, my dad was able to see a far more complex beauty in the planets and stars and everything in between than the vast majority of people on our planet, including me. He belonged to a select class of people who had earned special scientist classes at places like Harvard, where I'd twice applied and been rejected, and could now see the world in 3D IMAX, while the rest of us were stuck seeing it in lame 2D using equipment that hadn't been updated since our last science class in high school. Having established my dad's superior understanding of the universe and his undivided attention at this restaurant in Paris, I asked him something I'd been wondering many nights of my childhood while lying awake in bed. How can it be that the universe is infinite? Or if it is not, what is beyond the outer limits of the universe? My dad sipped his wine and outlined the current theories, which involved the universe folding over on itself, or expanding infinitely, or looping perpetually in a system of black holes. Whatever the theories were, they all sounded ridiculous and left me unsatisfied, the way the Big Bang left me unsatisfied. If everything started from a super dense ball of energy, what came before the ball of energy? If nothing existed before, where did the matter forming the ball of energy come from? If the clock started at 0, who or what created the clock? My dad admitted he didn't know the answers to these questions. He did not know what was beyond the universe or the Big Bang. That, he said, was where the beauty or God or whatever else you wanted to call it came in. It was a world-shattering admission. If my dad, who'd completed the most advanced degree at one of the world's best institutions, who understood more about science and the universe than just about anyone other than geniuses like Einstein and Hawking, didn't have answers, there was absolutely zero chance I would find them either. My dad's understanding of the spiritual dimensions of the universe was hardly better than that of the ancient Egyptians, who shaped their pyramids like primordial mound with shafts connecting the burial chambers to the sky to launch the souls of pharaohs into the heavens. Even Einstein, who criticized childlike belief in a personal God, and fanatical atheists who could not hear the music of the spheres, didn't have the answers. Einstein wrote about his religious beliefs in relation to God and the universe as follows, quote, "Your question is the most difficult in the world. It is not a question I can answer simply with yes or no. I'm not an atheist, and I don't think I can call myself a pantheist. We are in the position of a little child entering a huge library filled with books in many languages. The child knows someone must have written those books. It does not know how. It does not understand the language in which they are written. The child dimly suspects a mysterious order in the arrangement of the books, but doesn't know what it is. That, it seems to me, is the attitude of even the most intelligent humans toward God. We see the universe marvelously arranged and obeying certain laws, but only dimly understand these laws. Our limited minds grasp the mysterious force that moves the constellations." End quote. When my dad asked me to go to the orbital insertion, 2 summers after we'd shared coffees in the Michigan Union, I think I understood as well as anyone in our family what the event meant to him, professionally and perhaps spiritually. Also, I just returned from the Maine woods and gotten a job for the rest of the summer in Kansas selling air filters door to door, even though what I really wanted to do was grow my hair out and write stories. So I welcomed the opportunity to join my dad for an undoubtedly unique experience that, regardless of the outcome, would make a good story. So I'm going to read the end. I'm not going to leave you hanging. Just going to take a sip of water. Arrangements had been made for the families of the Cossini scientists to witness the orbital insertion at a large public auditorium, which, with its wood and upholstery chairs, reminded me of the old auditorium in my high school. Like high school students, we picked up boxed meals at the entrance and shuffled into our seats to wait, all of us early so as not to miss the big moment. We were the families of the academic scientists. The operations guys, and some gals, were at the command center in the nearby jet propulsion lab. I remember feeling a little disappointed at the lack of pomp and circumstance. Not that I'd expected a red carpet and an open bar, though that would have been nice, but they could have at least hung some streamers for the crowning achievement of this pyramid in space everyone had spent so much time, money, and brain hours on. When the moment came near, none of that mattered. I woke up from my nap and felt the palpable anticipation in the air. I couldn't imagine a room full of bearded and bespectacled space scientists with a staggering collective IQ more keyed up on the edge of their seats. Some people spoke, presumably to the family members, about the background and aims of the Cassini mission, and explained the precarious maneuver the spacecraft would need to make to successfully enter Saturn's orbit. The big screen toggled between shots of the JPL command center and the graphic of the spacecraft approaching Saturn's ring. When this critical moment was upon us, the signals from Cossini went silent, and so did the auditorium, except for the whispers of parents to young children explaining what was happening. Minutes later, the signal started up again. The spacecraft had successfully threaded the gap between Saturn's F and G rings. Moments later, the spacecraft signaled it had avoided disintegrating in Saturn's atmosphere. It had entered orbit. The auditorium erupted in applause and cheers. The scientists gave each other high fives, and my dad and I did the same. People hugged and kissed their loved ones. Grins and tears abounded. I'd been to many football games at the Big House, the largest stadium in the country, with 115,000 screaming fans, but this celebration ran deeper. I felt, as I'm sure others did, that the team we were cheering for included the entire human race, with the steady forward progress hardwired into every cell of our existence and evolution that has led to the pyramids of our species. Back at the hotel, my dad, his colleagues, and the families all sat down at a table together and ate, drank, and laughed in abundance. No one questioned the age of those like me who were not yet 21. I've never seen my dad in better spirits than that night in the company of his colleagues. Men and women who understood the complex matrix of equations and models that formed the language of the planets, Einstein's music of the spheres, and had dedicated their lives to better understanding that language so we might converse with the beauty or God, or at least listen to what it had to tell us. I had not yet developed an existential purpose, but I was starting to think it had to do with literature with a capital L, and my desire to one day write such literature, to join the Sisyphean search for truth as my dad had done and my mom had also done, through her equally, if not more noble work with people rather than planets. I believed in the state motto of Kansas, which had been the rallying cry of pioneers who founded my home state and those who shed blood to keep it free from slavery. Ad astra per aspera, to the stars through difficulties. As I write this, Cossini nears the end of its decades-long mission, scheduled to run out of fuel and crash into Saturn's atmosphere in September 15, 2017, days after I returned from my honeymoon with my soon-to-be wife and a month before my 34th birthday. The Cossini Mission 2 will have lived 34 years from its conception in 1983. My dad bittersweetly noted the end of the mission during a recent phone conversation. Other scientists would continue studying the data from Cossini for years, but my dad, who is 68 and approaching retirement, would not apply for any new grants to do so. Seeking such multi-year grants was a younger man's game, he said. I sensed he wasn't ready to give up the game yet, to pass the baton, but felt compelled to do so by forces greater than he. The night of the orbital insertion, it was us younger sons and daughters who continued the celebration in the hotel's outdoor hot tub after our parents retired to their rooms. We'd been strangers only days before, but we were old pals in that hot tub, talking about our colleges, majors, jobs, and our dorky parents, awash in the positive energy of the occasion and our bright young futures. We also felt, at least I did, a special bond in that we'd all been caught through some fortune beyond our own doing, like survivors in a plane crash, in this cosmic alignment of planets, machines, and man. I was the last one in the hot tub, along with the daughter of my dad's colleague, who was in college in California and whom I'd probably never see again. Our bodies found each other under the water as we gazed at the sky, knowing that somewhere 934 million miles away, the pyramids of our fathers was orbiting Saturn. We had no choice but to marvel at the beauty of the universe. Thank you.